Hey everyone, Mr. Souther coming at you with a video about Unit 5, Lesson 5, Enhanced For Loops. So let's get started. All right, I'm going to skip some of the slides, of course, just cut to the chase. Basically, we're going to go through the modules, and for the most part, it's pretty straightforward. I want to show you a couple of the coding modules as well. But it's always nice to know how this thing actually works. So up to this point, we've actually used regular for loops, is what I can call it. There's a reason you want to use an enhanced for loop. And again, it's basically going to make a copy of the value stored in the array, as you can see here. So this takes you back to simpler times when we had a 1D array. And this is a array of objects. There's a donut, there's a cake, and there's a pie in this array. If you want to make a copy of it, we would use this enhanced for loop using the dessert class, where it would take my desserts and copy them over to the dessert. And then with the objects, basically, you'll recall that objects are stored somewhere in memory. When you make a copy, basically, something cool happens, which we didn't know in the past. So there's the three objects: strawberry flavor or strawberry donut, chocolate cake, pie, right? There's also the prices for each one of them. And then when we use that enhanced for loop, we're going to go ahead and copy, and it looks like we're going to set the price as well. Okay, so it doesn't mess with the original 1D array, where it would change the price for all of these in this new array called the dessert. Now, let me go ahead and show you the graphics. And then what's cool is that the enhanced for loop variable becomes an alias of the reference stored in the array. So you make that, basically what we're trying to say is you're going to make the copy and then you can influence the price there. But essentially they're aliases. So dessert donut, dessert cake, dessert pie would be the same in both. Okay, so we're going to go through the code. I have a video. You need to pay attention to the way they write the code because you're going to use this over and over. So the main thing to pay attention here is we have an outer for loop and an inner for loop like this. And we need to know what order they're going to go in. You'll notice, so basically what we're trying to do is if we have an array, a 2D array, it goes 10, 20, 30, next row goes 40, 50, 60, and the third row goes 70, 80, 90 like that. We need to be able to go row by row, right? And then we need to access element by element. So essentially what we're doing is we're kind of doing a row major traversal in a way. So the first for loop, what it does is it creates a 1D array here, right? So it's a 1D array called row. And we're going to go ahead and copy the numbers over to that new 1D array. And it's going to match that int data type. And then when I'm in that same value, same row, I'm going to go ahead and copy each element over as a value. You'll notice that this does not have the hard brackets next to it. So we know that value is merely just a variable. It's going to store each individual value. So let me show you what this looks like as I move ahead. So we're going to go through the first outer loop, which is going to access, you'll notice it accessed that first row, the 10, 20, 30. And then the inner loop is going to access each element within there and print it. Okay. And then at the end of that loop, we're going to do system.out.println, and it's going to print nothing, but just give you a new line. And the new line, we're going to do the same thing again and go through each row, traverse through each row, and print it like that. So the purpose of this code was merely just to take a row of numbers. So maybe originally we had a curly brace 10, 20, 30, and curly brace, comma, curly brace 40, 50, 60, and curly brace, comma, right? And break it up so it looks like a matrix, or it looks like this kind of row, row order or row column order, if that makes sense, right? So it's a little bit more pleasing to the eye. So I can pick out my rows and columns pretty easily. So that's kind of what's happening there. All of that get produced, and that's pretty much it. Now I'll stop sharing and move over to the code. All right, so now I'm going to move over to the code. We have Unit 5, Lesson 5, Enhanced For Loops, right? Let's go ahead. I'm going to skip, well, we can do the prediction. You're going to see that same for loop here when you do the predict and run. So you can take a look. I have my 2D array of numbers, and then we have this numbers.java, and right away you'll see this is what we did back in row major traversal, that lesson. And then here's the big one where you're going to see it's a static method, but it's going to try to do something in this new format of an enhanced for loop we've done. Right, so I'll go ahead and run this thing because I'm talking about it. I don't need to write anything for me. What's interesting is supposedly it's going to take each element here and multiply by 2. But you'll notice that when you actually run this thing, nothing's happening, right? So the original 2D array looks the same as the actual enhanced loop array. So when I did this, I was like, nothing's happening. So what am I looking at that's spectacular? The next module will basically do the same thing. It just tells you, hey, what's going on with the method. I'm going to go ahead and keep running this just because I want to show you, kind of get to the point where you actually modify the code, which is going to be another module 4. So for the first 3, you should be able to just run through it quickly. And if you're watching this video like you are, then I'll show you afterwards. Okie doke. So I have the same thing again, but this time in the numbers.java, they want us to make a modification in the change values method. So let's go down to the change values method, which is here. Okay. And they want us to make a minor change here. So I'm going to go ahead and comment out the original lines that we had in here, because I like to see the difference here. And let's go ahead and copy and paste the code that they had. Oops. Just trying to clean this up. I like to see the indents nicely. Okay. So now let's go ahead and run it, and you'll see with this with the actual for loop, you'll notice that the actual elements here doubled in value, right? So like the last row went from 50 to 100, 51 to 102, 52 to 104. So it actually did what it was supposed to do. Now you might be asking, well, why is that the case, right? So what's happening here is that if you use an enhanced for loop, you're basically making a copy and it's not really modifying any of the elements correctly. So you're going to want to use, their point they're trying to make is you want to use a regular for loop to actually access each individual element and multiply it by 2. So you're going to want to do that. And so just showing you that enhanced for loops aren't like bulletproof. It's not for everything. It helps you make a copy, traverse through it. And basically, I'm going to show you what the uses are in a minute. I'm just going to finish this. And I think you're going to see the cool stuff right here. So I'm going to show you parts A and B here, and I'd like you to do parts C and D. Now, I'm going to warn you that when you get to part D for student activity, it's going to give you an error on the test. You'll run it. It'll pop out a number 40, I think it was, or whatever it had. When you test it, it's going to give you an error. Don't worry about that. The thing I thought I was going crazy, and I went to the teachers, the provided, and they provided me all the code as answers, and I ran that, and it still came out as a test error. It ran correctly, but the test resulted in error. So do not worry about that. Okay, so that's for part D. I'm going to do A and B. I want you to do C and D. Why am I showing you both A and B? Well, here's why. What you're going to do in A is this one, you're actually just finding the maximum value, I think. Yeah, so you're finding a maximum value. So they want to know how many books were borrowed, or what was the most amount of books in each genre or whatever that were borrowed. Okay, so what I mean by that is we're given this array 352, 146, 253. So it's a 3-row, 3-column, 2D array. They just managed to just throw it all in one line, which I understand. We have an object called library where they're storing that one 2D array attached with it. And then we're going to call that get most borrowed method and print the result. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to pay attention to, well, what's the name of the array they have created? They have book count. It's an INT data type, right? So that's the 2D array I want to use here. And then in order to get the most borrowed, something has to happen. And this is where, like, I'm going to go back to tester class and just remind you. Remember, Java goes through each element at a time. That's kind of how it works, right? If I said, hey, so-and-so, can you find me the, biggest number? Well, you would be able to do it in a matter of seconds because these numbers are pretty small, right? It's only one, it's one number each time. And you're just going to look at it and you're going to be like, oh, 6 is the highest number. And I'm going to ask, well, how did you know that? And you'll probably say, well, I just looked at them, right? So slow it down a little bit. Think about how like a 5-year-old would do this, or a Java would do it. Is going to access one number at a time. Remember in coding that it is all basically storage based. I can't have data without storage, right? So right now I'm going to look at one. The first element is 3. That's my highest number. The next number is 5. Ooh, 5 is higher than the previous biggest number. So 5 is my new biggest number. 2 is smaller than 5, so I'm going to ignore you. 1 is smaller than 5. 4 is smaller than 5. Ooh, but 6 is bigger than 5. So now 6 becomes my highest number. Then I'm going to keep going, and none of those are higher than 6. So that's the logic we're going to do here. So first thing I'm going to do is I told you to copy that code. So we had the 4, right? And we're going to go ahead and use that data type and make a 1D array for basically the row, right? Whatever was going on in the row. So I think each row represents a specific book. So each row represents a specific book genre. So let's go ahead and just use that book genre. And I'm going to go ahead and copy over that row of book count. With capital C, it is. Okay, so we're going to do that. And then I'm going to go ahead and do a curly brace. So that's going to start the row. And then I'm going to do an inner loop so I can have one value that stores each element. Right, so it's just going to say count for the book genre. And then here's where the kicker is. So remember, we're going to if that count value is greater than the max count, right? Whatever that maximum is. Then I'm going to go ahead and set max count equal to the count, right? So establishes new maximum number. And then let's go ahead and return that when I'm done. Oops, return that max count. Now you might be asking, Southard, you made a variable, but you didn't declare it. You're absolutely right. So I'm going to go ahead and do max count equals 0, right? So we're going to start this thing off with the maximum number of books in the genre is 0, right? And then I'm going to start replacing that. It's kind of nice initial value to give the variable. That way it can replace it later. Let's go and run this, make sure it's error-free, which is, and then now I'm going to go ahead and just call that get most spoken. So I'm going to do system in, and let's go and use that library object to call the get most borrowed, because get most borrowed method is not static. It should spit out a number, which is 6. Test it, and off we go. So again, this is for a maximum count. If you go to part B, so part A is going to look like C. Choice B is going to look like choice D. Okay, on choice D, I'm just trying to find the total number of animals I think that are spotted. Like Rosalind throws the farm. We have a 2D array called animal count. And then I just need to know how many animals there are. Okay, so for this one, what I'm going to do is I need to store some value for the total animals, right? And for the total animals, I can also give you the average, but show you that in a second. But let's go ahead and do, this is the int data type, so int equals 0. Let's go ahead and start our initial loops, right? So we do row count. That's how we count in that number how many animals there are. And the array is called animal count right there. I need the inner loop to actually store the count for each element in that row count, right? Let me just copy it over. And then what we're going to do is this plus equals, right? Once again, so as I go through each element, we're going to add up all the counts. And that's it. And return that total. Check if there's any errors, which there shouldn't be. Okay. And then we'll go to wildlife runner. Let's go ahead and call and use that. So it's going to be the object tool, get animals, and then this should work. So a lot of this is pretty simple, obviously, if you know kind of where you're headed, right? And that passes. Okay, so in part D, you're going to do something very similar, but let me show you what the difference is. Let me just double check that. I believe it's asking for the, oh no, it's asking for the highest total. Let me show you one that's going to require an average. Let me finish that. Should have been in module 7. I guess there's daily temperatures. I think, oh yeah, this one. They're daily average temperatures. I think this is because this is kind of nice because this is the only one I've seen that actually builds upon what we actually did in the previous unit. Recall in the previous unit, what we did was we actually went through the rows and found the total and then found the average. So we're going to do that with enhancement. So how we're going to do that is these are all the temperatures here you'll see on the left. So basically what I'm trying to do, let me just complete some of the empty space so you can see it easier on my screen. Okay, so there's no parameter given. I'm going to go ahead and use the total again. Units. Let's go ahead and make the for loop. And it's a double data type. So I'm going to make a 1D array that I call row total. That's going to store all the daily temps, right? Because that's the name of the 2D array given. Now I'm going to do another inner for loop that's going to do each element. So it's going to be, that's called a temp. It's going to be coming in from row total. So I'm going to go through that one row that we've picked and go through element by element and store it in a new variable. And then all I got to do after that is just take the total and do the plus equals temp. And then you're done for that. For the return, we're going to take that total and we need to divide it by the number of elements there are. And I want to show you this again because this came up in the previous lessons, right? So we need to find out how many rows times the number of columns, and then boom, we have the total of elements. So you're going to take the number of rows times the number of columns, remember, and we're going to use that bracket 0 again, dot length to do this. Let me just run it, make sure we're error free. And that did go through error free. So then if I go back to the front, let's go ahead and print in the is, and then do concatenation and do cities dot chunk. And this should work. Yes. Test it. All right. And that'll be that. So this should be enough to get you started. Let me know if you have questions.